Hello, am I audible? Starting in 3, 2, 1. Sorry. So, look, the point of life isn't to have control. The point of life is to give up control. In a world where you are never going to be able to have zero, like when you're in a world where no matter how good a leader you are, you're not going to be able to have zero violence, you're not going to be able to have zero loss. In a world where all these spirits and pelicans and whoever that you have such connection to is going to inevitably disappoint you, defy you, hurt you, or die, you are not getting control in either world. Just because you're a leader, a god, a superhuman, does not mean you have control. Now, from CG, we are essentially going to win this debate through flashes, right? The first flash that I'm offering is, in our world, Mahito gets to live a few more years of childhood, and in their world, he's immediately a leader of a fantastical world that is larger than life, that is otherworldly, right? So, first piece of analysis that I give you, that is unique to CG that what you did not cover, is on the speaker, the level of emotional capacity and emotional strain that you experience when you become a leader is something that a young boy is simply not prepared for. I have been running a small organization since I was 19-year-old, and I'm so damn tired, I want to quit. And I've been wanting to quit for the past 3 years, but I haven't been able to because people rely on me. There are people whose livelihoods rely on me, and I have to be responsible for everything that goes wrong and all the contracts signed, and I have to constantly answer for everybody's mistakes, and I'm basically managing people's emotions every single day because someone got hurt, because someone said something, etc., etc. Magnify this experience 1,000-fold to Mahito now being the leader, the sole leader of a fantastical world where there is actual violence that affects people's eternity, where if you get eaten by a pelican, you cannot return to the world. Now, for a young boy, this kind of strain on his emotional capacity is such that there really is a certainty that he will not be able to be happy in that world. Leaders are rarely happy unless they really don't give a shit about the people that they're leading, in which case it's going to be not a benevolent leader, which we think is even worse because that kind of if it's a choice between living as a human being in Japan and being a very harmful leader in another world, their entire argument is he's going to, the Gav's entire argument is going to help people, he's going to relate to them. And so if he cares about these people, he's going to face a lot of emotional harm. If he doesn't care about these people, he's going to be, not a benevolent ruler, so that their case just falls apart. Second piece of analysis is, when even in real Japan, in the real world, the opportunity to help people exists, but now it is far more real. And I'm going to talk about this more in my second class. But also they talk about the wonder of childhood, right? We argue that the wonder of childhood does not lie in a fantastical world, but in the imagination of fantasy, out of a real world. And what we mean by this is, look at, every single superhero story that we know, all of them just wants to be a real boy and wants to be a human being. Why is this? It is because, escape will always exist. You can always escape your imagination through reading a book, through talking to someone completely new and someone who's really different. You can always have whimsy out of the real world, where you can make whimsy out of your own. And we argue that you have far more space to do that because you get to live for yourself and your community in the real world. In their world, you simply have not a second to yourself, to live for yourself, to live for the whimsy that you once had as a child. You just don't have the time to form the connections and the community that you can form in Japan, where you were born, where you were raised, and where you have two loving guardians, and a rural estate where you can play with your friends. Now, moving on to my second flash about like fulfillment, right? No. Honorable Speaker, we argue that there is more beauty in the mundaneness of being a human than there is in the glory of being a significant leader of an otherworldly world. Why do we say this? We believe the beauty of the range of human emotions is greater than the control you will feel from being a leader. Why do we say this? We say this because their argument is, Jay, when you enter this world as a leader, you have this identity where it is, you have a solid identity where you know who you are now. And in our world, you don't know who you are. We say that exactly the reason that our world is better is because you don't know who you are. You can make yourself. You can create your identity. Your identity is dynamic and you can have revolutions within your own soul. That is the point of being human. That is the value of being human. To grow, to change, to be better than who you were yesterday. To be happier than who you were yesterday. To have more friends than you had yesterday. We tell you that control is a cage where you have to live for other people without them ever reciprocating their care. Understand this, in their world, the care that Mahito has to give is never reciprocated. And again, more material that OG doesn't give you, right? Community is only authentic when you are not forming community just because you're powerful. When there is symmetry of power between friends, those friendships are far more authentic, far more reciprocal in their care, and far more fulfilling than the care you get from being God. No one's friends with God. People just have to be friends with him. Anyway, point is, the range of experiences that you have as a human are steady in their diversity. It's not like suddenly you're put in this world and now you have to lead it. It's something Mahito can be much more ready for, can take as the capacity for. And lastly, just to conclude, the chance to live for yourself in a real world is much better than to play God in a fantastic world.
I thank the member for his speech. Now let's welcome the Glasgow.
So before I start, a few illuminating facts about my debate career. So this is essentially the first offline locals break that I have. Secondarily, this is the second local tournament that I'm doing, which is ironic because I have done 3 majors but 2 locals in university, so which is funny. Finally, I did not intend on doing this tournament at all. I registered for this tournament, as Raihan knows, very long after the pre-registration period was already over. I approached Fatima very last minute, so thanks to her for agreeing to do this with me. And because of her, I guess I'm in the finals of my first locals. So thanks for that. And yeah, and apart from that, we organized the tournament in IIT recently, so I assumed that was going to be the last debate engagement that I would have. I did not, ever really intend on coming back to the circuit debate, so which is fun to be able to do this right now. So yeah, with that, either after my speech, you'll either win this debate or completely lose. So let's see what happens. Right. Starting my debate in 3, 2, 1. I think I understand why Mahathir comes from the international circuit, because all of the argumentation is just whitewashed argumentation about what humanity is, what the purpose of life is, which I don't really know how to reason through this debate, right? I think the fatal flaw that all of these teams in this debate do is, they forget that this is an active debate, right? So the issue is that all of the argumentations that come from opening government, and also from all the opposition teams, relies on the fact of Mahito being a rational and mature character, right? So all of these things that Antara talks to you about, like to say that he understands the meaning of life, or that he could have growth, all of this argumentation relies on the fact that Mahito is able to understand his consequences and is able to make his decision that is not proximal to him right now, right? That is not true, right? The problem is Mahito is a completely irrational character. He is like a 6 or 14-year-old kid, just as Raihan said, right? Which is even more funny that he goes on to explain impacts that rely on him being older. So, let me start with characterizing Mahito properly in this debate, right? Who is Mahito? Mahito is a kid, right? He's a 6 to 14-year-old kid who does not understand any of these things. He does not have the rational decision-making calculus of understanding what a good leader is or what would happen to this other world. I will take it later, please do not batter me. So, he does not have the capacity to understand what this other world is and what is the impact of him being a leader, right? So, right from then on, I think all of their argumentation falls flat about what will happen if he becomes a bad leader or what will happen if he becomes someone who is, like assumes responsibility from his grandfather because it's, something that he thinks of that as an obligation. We don't think that any of these things are true, right? Because Mahito simply can never even comprehend these things in the first place. Because he's a kid. He does not care about these things. He does not have the capacity to care about this. Secondary, what has Mahito been through? And then connecting them to what he actually wants beyond rationality, right? Mahito has been through war. And it's not just about the war happening in your neighborhood or not. It's about losing your mother. It's about feeling betrayed by your father, moving on so quickly to marrying his own aunt, right? It's about losing his friends and his entire school when he was relocated from his family. Even if the war did not happen in his backyard, he still felt very visceral impacts of that war directly in his mind, right? What does this mean? This means that even if Mahito is a very, very rational character, the wants and needs that you have right now are like beyond rationality itself, right? Because they're very, very proximal. What do these look like? These look like Mahito wanting some form of escapism, right? So it does not rely on any rational decision making that, wait, I need to escape because I feel like I'm on a hedonistic treadmill. That is not the case, right? He has simply been subjected to so much violence and so much repression that he simply wants to escape. It's beyond rationality. Secondary, right? He wants control and agency in his life. Again, this also does not rely on rationality because he has viscerally seen the lack of this in his life, right? So it does not mean that he really understands the concept of control, but he does understand that he does not have it in his life, and that is simply enough mechanism for him to want that in his life. Thirdly, he wants a deterministic life, right? So all throughout his life, he has understood that he does not have any control. This necessarily means that he does not understand the laws of the world, right? Why are men fighting each other? Why are they killing each other? Why did my mother have to die burning? Why did my father have to move on? He does not have the rational decision-making calculus to understand the father needs to move on from the trauma of losing his wife as well, right? But he is not able to comprehend these things. He is only able to comprehend things that will be irrationally, proximally, impulsively that come up to him, right? Alright, now connecting this to why he would want to go to the other world. So, we need to understand the metrics, Raihan, I already told you, I'll take from later. So, understand that this world has a few characteristics that directly apply to what he wants, right? Beyond rationality. So what are these things? First, the world at the very least is quite simple, right? So there are pelicans that eat souls, you are the god of this world, you have seen animals that go around here, right? So it's fairly simple. For a child's brain, it is probably easier to comprehend this world than the world that they have just been subjected to, right? On a secondary layer, all the trauma and loss that they have felt in that world have never been experienced to him in this world beforehand, right? So this is a unique opportunity for him to experience something that is not what he has just experienced. So it's not that he's doing this for the pursuit of happiness or for the pursuit of growth or for the pursuit of being a better leader. He's simply doing this because he has faced horrible, horrible consequences in the other world, and he understands this world better than the world that he has just lived in, right? Secondly, I think that this world gives him a lot of control, right? So he's a god. Assuming no one has watched the actual movie, we can assume that he can do whatever the fuck he wants, right? He can create human beings if he wants. He can do whatever the fuck he wants because he's the creator and caretaker of this world. Even though I will not engage in this dimension because I don't think anyone really talked about this. But this is something that you guys should factor in. Because understand that this is a dimension that unlocks a lot of benefits for Mahito, and this credits a lot of time that we talk about. That we say anything that Mahito wants to be, he can be in this fucking world, right? Alright, moving on. Moving on. So, let's talk about, in general, even apart from this, right? Even if Mahito is somewhat of a rational character, so how do we still win this debate, right? Because we believe that even if rationality will to play a place, he does four things, right? He wants to avoid laws. Very simplistically, he wants to avoid laws, and he can do that when he goes into this world because he hasn't faced that in the world, right? Secondarily, he wants to get some agency or control in his life, and he is able to do this by becoming the god of the world. Thirdly, he doesn't really need worldly benefits, right? So if he is the creator of this world, he doesn't need human connection, he doesn't need any of these things to grow and whatnot, and he has already been through a lot that he doesn't need to learn the ropes of life. Go on.
Your last ones. Okay. In the actor motions, we debate on what is best for the actor, not likelihood analysis based on his irrationality about what he is going to do. Please engage on Clash.
Yeah, in actor debate, I think we define what the actor would want to do, right? Even beyond rationality. So if it's a person who believes that something that they're doing is good, even if it's bad, I need to defend why the actor would want to do this. And that is something what I'm doing essentially, right? So at the end of the day, what am I trying to prove to you, right? I'm trying to prove to you the reason that OG does not exist in this debate, because they simply, all of their benefits really rely on this simple mechanism of what sort of decision maker actually Mahito is, right? Because they were not able to prove that link of Mahito being a rational character, all of the benefits that they talk about do not exist. Secondly, why is O up in this debate as well, right? Similarly, all the harms that they talk about also do not exist because they are not able to prove to me why Mahito would actually take these decisions. So even if a decision is good for an actor, you also need to tell me why the actor is likely to take those decisions, even beyond that action being good for them, right? So maybe, walking every day is good for me. That doesn't mean I would effectively always keep doing it, right? And lastly, why is also C out of this debate, right? Because even after Fatima brings this argumentation up, and the reason we did not bring up it was regarding this, is the irrationality mechanism, right? She calls out that look, Mahito is an irrational actor. We get no engagement from Antara, and it's too late if Mahathir comes up with a completely new framing in this debate to win this round. Thank you very much.
I had a little speech that I'm going to opt with to conclude the debate.
Okay, before we begin, just a few things. I'm irritated with the government advocacy because all throughout my 10 years of debating, a lot of the way I frame cases and come up with thoughts has been because of Antara, and the circuit has criminally underrated, like just the last speech, right? That's Antara's case. It's not my case. It's not a European case. It's Antara's case. And generally, she inspires me to think in the ways that I do, and I'm just like, friendship is magic, and if you are constantly forced to be an adult, you can never reside into someone's arms and be a child who gets to cry about their mother's death. In a world where you're a ruler, you design someone to take care of you, but they only say the things that you want them to say. When you have that power dynamic, who takes care of you other than your aunt, other than your father? Someone who has experienced that trauma alongside you is the only person who can give you the closure that childhood requires for you to become an adolescent and an adult. That's why we do this. First, some housekeeping on OO and why we take over OO. I think OO is good. I just think that they follow the classic debater trap of wanting to win the debate on a specific context. We take the higher burden, which is regardless of OG or CG's setup of what this fantasy world or what wartime Japan looks like, Antara's case works. Because we believe that even if Japan sucks and you have to live in wartime Japan, people make the most of it. People lose parents. My father marries another man. All of these things happen to me, woman. All of these things happen, and I grow up and I deal with it. And I think just because it's negative in the moment doesn't mean that it's not beneficial in the long run. That in and of itself makes us better than O. Because if O's entire claim is there are certain ways to be a bad ruler, Antara's claim on why the emotional capacity required to rule is not about how you rule, but the fact that a 40-year-old has to rule. I think that's just basically why we win this. Versus OG. I think, again, a lot of OG's case is very easy to flip. Because if you think about it, right? They say that if you are going to become a benevolent ruler because you have access to a community of different people and different spirits and you talk to them. And they tells you, these are people who will revere you. These are people who you are going to be subjugated to. All of that means that these are not people you talk to your mother about. These are not people you talk to the horrors of war about, because if you do, one, you look like a weak ruler who isn't taking care of them and isn't listening to them. But two, even if you do, they are forced to feel sympathy for you because of the power you hold over them. Have you tried talking to a friend who basically says yes to everything you say? That is not a therapy session. That is you talking to ChatGPT, and that sucks. I just think that in and of itself is why this doesn't work, right? But let's flip their case even further. If you are a benevolent ruler with different groups who you can take care of and manage of, that increases the emotional capacity as Antara points out. But even if it doesn't, what it means is, guys, almost all young princes who had to become kings had horrible lives because court politics ruined their lives. So if these people have to manage the different factions and their emotional problems and their different diverging needs, I just think that makes that a really hard thing for a child to have to process. And what that does is it pushes the requirement of closure and pushes the wound of dealing with a dead mother further and further and further back into the back of your mind. What that means is you are now defined by your mommy issues and you are now basically in that life just limited to that life of service. Why is a life of service bad? A life of service is bad because a life of service is just a life of only performing care for someone over and over and over again. Two things happen. Either you burn out and you are someone who now only acts because you have to do it and this is a job. You're not a ruler, you're a manager. What that means is this person doesn't find fulfillment. But secondarily, even if this person does find fulfillment in service, this just means that there are complex gaps in them running away from the trauma that they experience. What is this? Something called CPTSD. What that basically means is when you don't deal with the festering wound of your mother's loss and the fact that your father betrayed you, you go to sleep and are unable to sleep properly because you're reminded of that hospital burning, because you have no one else to talk to about the horrors of war. What that means is that you now feel periods of depression and periods of mania. Bipolar disorder is defined by kids who refuse to deal with loss and disassociate from that loss. All of that means that even if Mahito doesn't experience all of these symptoms, he goes to sleep sad. He goes to sleep with no one to take care of him, and he goes to sleep in a way that he never feels fulfilled. All of that means in our world, you basically now have the tools to go through it. How do you go through it? Antara tells you this exactly. If you try to impose control, you lose more and more of yourself. It is only through accessing community and accessing reciprocal friendships that you deal with loss. Panel, all of you here have lost something, have lost someone. You don't deal with loss by keeping it bottled up. You cry about it, you share about it. You feel all of those emotions with people who have also lost things similarly. You don't cry to a pelican, you cry in the arms of your lover or your friend. Getting to know your mom's life from your aunt is an important part of growing up. Learning to accept your aunt's love and seeing her as a mother is an important part of growing up. Just because it hurts you in the moment doesn't mean it's not useful for you to experience. All of that points towards the importance of dealing with loss. Again, it's a very simple case. If you don't deal with the problem that's hurting you now, this problem will only grow. And as your management responsibilities increase, the more and more you will feel like a shell of a person. I won't take it. I'll take those.
You have analyzed how an enlightened perception should be. What are Mahito's incentive to actually tap into this perception?
Oh, nice. Okay. BP activates. Just because the actor is transiently irrational doesn't mean we have to pick illogical choices for them. We have to pick the best logical choice, and if that leads to the best logical outcomes, they have to pick that choice. Guys, it's the BP manual. It's really bad. Okay, look, why do you need dynamic humanity and dynamic reciprocal friendships? Because either you are now dealing with the ghosts of trauma haunting you, or you have a way to feel connected in your body. You have a way to feel taken care of, even if there are bombs dropping around you. The fact that you can go to your father and hug him and have that moment of, you know what, at least now I know how mother felt. That pain that she felt, that empathy you get to exercise is the part of living that Mahito probably wants to do. Not this limitation on just rulership and constant duties. If they want to have adventures, what happens? Your duties get in the way. But if you don't do your duties and you want to do adventures, here's what happens. You are no longer managing. You go on adventures, things start sucking more and more, and you're forced to confront the shame of you running away. You can keep running away, but then you see you running away causes more problems, and you're reminded of your mother, and then you go through that spiral of shame, guilt, and suffering. This is why it's important to state that.
I thank the opposition for the speech. I thank all of you for your debate. The result will be announced here, obviously. We will be departing to deliberate. Thank you, everyone.